Hello, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Firefighters in BC are bracing for more hot and dry weather this week as 270 wildfires continue to burn across the province. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney speaks out against a UN report saying fossil fuels need to be phased out. And we hear from our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, who explains how the Taliban is taking over major cities in Afghanistan as American troops continue to pull out.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister says he will not seek re-election and that a new PC leader will be chosen prior to the next provincial election. The 67-year-old made the comments during a recent caucus retreat in Brandon. Pallister says after almost 10 years as leader of the Progressive Conservatives and more than 5 years as Premier, now's the time for a new leader and a Premier to take our province forward. Pallister came under fire recently for comments he made about Canadian history. He apologized last week after saying that people who came to Canada before and after it became a country came to build it and not to destroy it. But since then, his Indigenous Relations Minister resigned from Cabinet. An evacuation order in response to the White Rock Lake wildfire burning between Kamloops and Okanagan Lake has been downgraded by the Columbia-Shuswap Regional District. That's allowing some residents to finally return home. The BC Wildfire Service says there is moderate growth in some areas along the north and southeast regions where close to 560 square kilometers have been torched. The fire is one of 270 burning across the province as crews brace for more hot weather this week. Close to 6,600 properties were on evacuation order across BC, while residents of more than 32,000 other properties have been told to be ready to leave at a moment's notice. Premier Jason Kenney says Alberta cannot flick a switch to end the use of hydrocarbon energy in response to a new UN climate report that renewed questions about Canada's climate plan. UN Secretary General said the report must sound the death knell for coal and fossil fuels.
I haven't read that report. What I can say is Alberta is committed to reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. We've already reduced emissions from the Alberta oil sands by 30% over the past 20 years. Our major producers have committed to net zero emissions by 2050, and Alberta is well ahead of the world on game-changing technologies to reduce emissions like carbon capture, utilization, and storage. The recent announcement of the world's first net zero hydrogen plant east of Edmonton is, I think, a precursor to a huge expansion to Alberta becoming a world leader in the hydrogen industry. So I think you're going to see Alberta increasingly leading in terms of the application of technology. But the notion that we can shut off the entire major industrialized economy with the flick of a switch is patently unrealistic.
Alberta is preparing to shift away from a strategy that has defined the response to COVID-19 since the pandemic began early last year. That was to test, trace, and isolate. As of August 16th, the province will no longer require people who have COVID symptoms or who test positive to isolate, though it's still being recommended. Our province will also stop routine testing, instead limiting tests to people with severe illness. The new policies have been criticized by the opposition NDP, the Canadian Pediatric Society, and Federal Health Minister Patty Hajdu. They say Alberta's loosened restrictions are worrisome because Alberta's lower rate of vaccination rate compared to the rest of Canada. Provincial health officials, however, say they're implementing an evidence-based plan allowing the province to prepare for life with COVID-19 in the long term. The Alberta government came out with a new public service announcement discussing a new online tool they say will make life easier for Albertans to try and find affordable housing. The UCP say the new tool will guide applicants through the process of evaluating eligibility, then connecting them with providers and housing options.
The new Find Housing online tool makes it easier for Albertans to access affordable housing. No more searching the internet to find housing help. All information on Alberta housing supports is now located in a one-stop resource. The Find Housing tool uses a guided process to help Albertans find, understand what they might be eligible for, and connect with a provider to apply. Simply click through the questions and follow the prompts. You'll see a list of housing options tailored to you, and then you can click or tap to reach a housing provider. The new Find Housing online tool is just one way Alberta's government is improving the housing system and making it easier to get the housing support Albertans need. Check the new tool out for yourself at findhousing.alberta.ca.
In a 7-1 vote on Tuesday, Lethbridge City Council approved the management of the Lethbridge Airport as a City of Lethbridge department. The YQL management team will remain as is, with the airport manager reporting to the Director of Corporate and Customer Services. This model will remain in place until Lethbridge reaches the key targets of 2 consecutive years of $500,000 net operating profit and more than 150,000 annual passengers. Once the thresholds are met, implementation of a management contract will be revisited by Council. Lethbridge will be receiving some new mental health supports. Both Ottawa and the UCP announced close to $39 million in funding for 24 infrastructure projects across Alberta. That includes money for Chinook Regional Hospital. Infrastructure Minister Prasad Panda says funding will also be used towards retrofits, repairs, and upgrades to provincially owned facilities. A media release from the Trudeau Liberals say facilities in Lethbridge, Calgary, and Edmonton will share $3.8 million of combined funding. It's not stated how much Chinook Regional Hospital will receive or what will be upgraded. Streets Alive Mission here in Lethbridge has unveiled a brand new mosaic on the south side of their building. It was thanks to a partnership with the University of Lethbridge's integrated management experience. Over the past few months, the mosaic was created with special tiles that were used to create the larger image. Community members who bought a tile would upload an image to be printed on one to go with the theme of human connections. The mural raised roughly $11,000 for Streets Alive.
It was a great opportunity. Streets Alive has always had a great working relationship with the University of Lethbridge and the Lethbridge College. The NISA nursing program, the addictions program, we get lots of interns. So when we were approached with this, we said yes. Young people are the future of charities.
For my group, it's the ins and outs. We had to deal with legalities in working with the city to get a mural up. So we learned all that process. We learned that things aren't a quick fix like they seem to be in the textbooks. It's like, oh, just do this, this, and this, and your problem's solved. It's not. Our social media team that we had focusing on this, like they got to put their marketing skills that they wanted to use into use and actually try and reach out to the community. So it's like almost every single group, I'm sure, has taken something away from their main program and brought it into the project and how to work with these things.
Yeah, that looks pretty impressive. The new mosaic can be viewed on the south side of Streets Alive on the corner of 4th Street and 4th Avenue South. A restaurant that is well known for a stormtrooper versus LPS incident is now pleading to the community for help to keep their doors open. Coco Vanilla Galactic Cantina is asking the community for help and support in order to stay open and continue paying their staff after dealing with low sales throughout the pandemic. Owner Brad Whalen says on average, they're only getting 3 to 7 tables filled each and every day, which is not enough to survive.
Well, the employees are the people that keep this place going. Like, you know, this is a new venture that started last year. There's no expectation for me to make any kind of money here for a few years, but making sure that I can keep the place open and keep my staff working. You know, they rely on it to pay their mortgage and their rent and their food and their school, and this is all about them. I mean, of course, as a business owner, eventually I want to be successful here, but starting out, right now the focus is getting people in the seats so that we can ensure that we can survive. I mean, if we close, there's 8 people that no longer have a job, and where do they go in a market now that's already struggling to offer jobs?
As a way to drum up more business, Coco Vanilla has introduced a new $7 meal, which is given to the homeless in our city. Whalen says it's a way not only to support the restaurant, but also to help our city's most vulnerable. Athletes in our province are getting set to compete in the 2023 Alberta Summer Games. The event will be hosted by Okotoks and Black Diamond, with the province investing $420,000 into the Games. There was an additional $70,000 that will go towards cultural initiatives. Government officials say the Games will generate close to $3 million for the local economies of Okotoks and Black Diamond.
The return in our province to sport, organized sport, and the return of these games will, without doubt, be an incredible boost for our young people and for your communities. Their strength, their resilience, their hope for the future will be on display during these games.
The Town of Black Diamond Council and Administration is looking forward to continue to work with the Town of Okotoks Council and Administration as we prepare to welcome the youth of Alberta in 2023 in the Alberta Summer Games.
Setting that goal of making it to the Games keeps athletes engaged and working hard every day. It helps to teach athletes the value of setting goals and is absolutely a highlight for athletes who participate. The Games are also an important part of the development for athletes, giving them a chance to learn about the processes of qualification and selection, gaining independence needed to be away from home and on their own during competition, and all of those little pieces that they'll need in order to succeed as they move into even higher levels of competition.
Officials say on 5 separate occasions, athletes who competed at the Alberta Summer Games also went on to represent Canada at the Olympics. Maze lovers can now head back to the popular Lethbridge Corn Maze to navigate the tricky terrain. Now, the maze reopened on July 30th, and as Micah Quinn explains, this year's event has added a flowery treat.
So you can come out and enjoy sunflowers this year.
An acre of sunflowers are now in bloom at the Lethbridge Corn Maze.
Inside the sunflowers there's a couple small mazes, like the kids' maze and a few other little ones. And the greatest idea of that is to take pictures inside with the sunflowers. They're starting to bloom now, or actually they're probably over half now. And we're expecting to be a full bloom by the weekend. And then they should be blooming for 3 to 4 weeks. And beside this, of course, we have our normal corn maze. It's this year 9 acres, because we have 1 acre of sunflowers, 9 acres of corn maze. And inside that maze, you have 3 different mazes. There's a trivia maze, there's a scavenger maze, and a big maze. And you can get lost in either one of them or all of them if you like.
The owner of the Lethbridge Corn Maze, Theo Slingerland, has designed and constructed the mazes himself for the past 22 years, and he says it took him about 2 to 3 days to finish them this time. This year's theme features Slingerland's own sense of humor.
So I put in different words. You can do move it, goat, and then it, or you can do move it, go at it, whatever you like to do with it. It's just a kind of a play of words, I guess.
Another addition to the corn maze is goat snuggling. The popular activity returned for a second year after the success of 2020.
Some people cry when they can pet goats, and some people are just sitting there for an hour petting a goat. And some kids are done in 5 minutes. I don't know. Everybody has a different reaction.
The Lethbridge Corn Maze will be up and running until October 30th. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
It appears as though scammers and fraudsters have been working overtime this summer. You can include the fly-by-night movers. Ron Riemann is with the Southern Alberta branch of the Better Business Bureau. He says there are red flags to watch out for when it comes to steering clear of movers who may not have the greatest reputation, including those who use unmarked vans.
There's always a red flag when you deal with something like this. You're right. It's an unmarked van. They'll do all their work by a laptop between the 2 seats in their cargo van. There's always a sense of urgency. They want the deposit right away. And because moving deals with a limited window of time, and there is a sense of urgency on the consumer's part, it's attractive to the consumer to say, hey, this person is going to get me out of a jam.
Ron will have more on how to protect yourself and your family from fraudsters coming up after business news. Thanks to some quick action by witnesses, 2 youths were saved from drowning in Red Deer County. RCMP say a couple of young people were swimming in Glenifer Lake on July 31st when both of the kids were struggling and went under. Police say witnesses jumped in and pulled both children to safety. They were transported to hospitals in Calgary and Innisfail, where they were treated and later released. Staff Sergeant Chris Matichuk said the heroic actions of the witnesses will be recognized by the RCMP. Police are also recommending the heroes for a St. John's Lifesaver Award. A truck has been destroyed after it was struck by lightning and caught fire while driving on the Trans-Canada Highway in Manitoba. Fire officials say a couple was driving on Highway 1 Monday afternoon when the lightning bolt hit the truck's radio antenna. It shorted out the electrical and started a fire in the dashboard. Deputy Fire Chief David Reith says with heavy rain at the time, the fire was extinguished by the time emergency crews arrived on scene. Fortunately, no one was injured. The U.S. National Weather Service received reports of tornadoes touching down in suburbs just north of Chicago late Monday. Damage was reported to trees and power lines after tornadoes were spotted just after 6 p.m. Some structure damage was also reported. The National Weather Service warned the twisters would be rain-wrapped and therefore difficult to see. The warnings left thousands of residents scrambling for cover. Fortunately, no injuries were reported. A woman in the United States who alleges she was brought to the UK at the age of 17 to have sex with Prince Andrew has filed a civil case claiming he abused her. Virginia Giuffre was an accuser of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein, says she was sexually assaulted by Prince Andrew in both London and New York. A spokesperson for the 61-year-old prince said he had no comment on the case, but has consistently denied the accusations. The case claims the prince engaged in sexual acts without her consent, knowing how old she was and that she was a victim of sex trafficking. The case also says his conduct continues to cause emotional and psychological distress for Jeffrey, who is now 38. There are more and more reports coming in of the Taliban taking over major centers in Afghanistan since American troops were pulling out. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari says the terrorist group is relentless.
The decision wasn't made on the fact that, okay, we finally have stability and peace in Afghanistan, but to what end or how do we stay there, because we can't solve this problem. And the U.S. has tried to sit down for a ceasefire with the Taliban. It hasn't worked. So in the meantime, the U.S. troops are withdrawing, and the Taliban are, relentless. They're not even, allowing to skip a beat and to allow, them to fully withdraw and then to go about their business. They are just pounding and really taking over major areas.
Lisa Daftari will also have details of how a former senior UK military commander says we can expect to see more terrorist attacks due to the large Taliban presence in Afghanistan. That Q&A is coming up later in our broadcast. Getting the COVID-19 vaccine to remote areas around the globe has been a challenge for many. Christian organization Mission Aviation Fellowship is using some of their aircraft to bring the vaccine to the mountain people in a village of southern Africa. As we hear in this next report, MAF is also transporting 3 nurses to help deliver some much-needed medical care.
Mission Aviation Fellowship has been helping to deliver COVID-19 vaccines to the mountain people of Kubinyane in the southern African nation of Lesotho. MEF pilot Grant Strugnall recently delivered the first doses of AstraZeneca to a mountainside clinic near Kubinyane, the most remote airstrip in Lesotho. He explained why this delivery was so vital for the frontline healthcare workers in this hard-to-reach location.
So at the moment in Lesotho, the government has acquired enough vaccines for all the healthcare workers. And that is not just the people who work at the clinic, but it's actually healthcare workers who work within the community in their home villages. So at this clinic today, a lot of people have come down from the mountains surrounding here to actually receive the vaccine because they work in their village as a healthcare worker. And they were included in this round of vaccination, so that is really good news.
And MAF continues to be ideally positioned to assist in more critical deliveries of COVID-19 vaccines while working directly with health authorities, NGO partners and local health contacts across the world. Peter Wooding for the Global News Alliance.
Great to see the work the Mission Aviation Fellowship is doing around the globe. Make sure you have lots of water and stay hydrated this week. The hot summer-like temperatures are returning here in southwestern Alberta. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. We had a mixture of sun and cloud today with a high in the mid-20s. Tonight, just a few more clouds developing with a low near 13 degrees. Wednesday, partly cloudy with a high expected near 30. Thursday, mainly sunny with a high near 25. Friday, lots of blue sky, sunshine, and a high near 30 degrees. A hot weekend is shaping up. Sunshine at 33 is expected on Saturday, sunny and 35 degrees for Sunday. Monday, the clouds return, and the mercury will dip slightly to 28 degrees. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 26 degrees and an average low of 11. The highest temperature of the state was recorded in 2003 at 37 degrees, and the record low was +1 in 1997. Sunrise was at 6:15, sunset at 8:59. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Victoria, BC will be nice and sunny with a high near 29. Vancouver will also see sunshine and a high of 25. Just a few clouds and 23s on tap for Calgary on Wednesday. Sunshine and 24 for Edmonton. Partly cloudy and 26 degrees for Regina. A slight chance of showers and 24 for Saskatoon. Expect lots of sunshine at 25 degrees in Winnipeg on Wednesday. Thunder showers and 29 for Toronto. Overcast and 31 degrees for Ottawa. A good chance of showers developing and 30 degrees for Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, it should be mainly cloudy and 26 in Fredericton, New Brunswick. Light drizzle and 24 for Halifax, Nova Scotia. Just a few clouds and 27 for Charlottetown, PEI. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, Expect light showers and a high of 22 degrees on Wednesday. Drought-stricken livestock producers in Alberta will be eligible for millions of dollars in financial relief. The province is making $136 million available under the Agri-Recovery Program. It's a joint initiative with Ottawa. The UCP has also asked the Trudeau Liberals to provide an additional $204 million for a total relief package of $340 million. The federal government is evaluating the request, but did announce $100 million in immediate relief for Alberta, BC, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Ontario, with programming costs being split 60-40 between the provincial and federal governments. The monies will allow for livestock producers and beekeepers to purchase water, feed, and fencing. Canadian Pacific Railway has increased its takeover offer for Kansas City Southern to $31 billion US. That is up from the previous offer of $25 billion. The new bid comes 9 days before KCS shareholders will vote on a rival offer by Canadian National Railway valued at $33.6 billion. While its new offer is still lower than the deal offered by CN, CP Rail says it believes its offer is more likely to be approved by U.S. regulators. CN Rail is awaiting a decision by the U.S. Surface Transportation Board on its plan to set up a voting trust that would acquire KCS and hold the company during a review of the overall deal. The board has already approved CP Rail's use of a voting trust. Power producer TransAlta Corporation says its second quarter loss narrowed to $12 million from a loss of $60 million a year earlier. Revenue, meanwhile, jumped 41.6% to $619 million. TransAlta says its comparable earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization amounted to $302 million. That is up 39% from the same period in 2020. The Calgary-based company has raised its financial outlook for the year to comparable earnings of between $1.1 and $1.2 billion. That is up from an earlier forecast of around $960 million. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 58 points on the day to finish at 20,496. The Dow was up 162 points to 35,265. The S&P 500 was up 4 points to 4437, and the Nasdaq was down 72 points to 14,788. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up $2 to $68.48 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 5 cents to $4.11 US. Gold was down a cent to $17.2893 US an ounce, and silver was even at $23.34 US an ounce. Wheat is at $425 per metric ton, barley's at $420, canola's at $8.78, and corn is at $450 per metric ton. Live cattle were up 65 cents to $123.65, feeder cattle were up 3 cents to $159.33, and lean hogs were up 78 cents to $109.68. The Canadian dollar was even over the past 24 hours at 79.87 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta is preparing to shift away from a strategy that has defined the response to COVID-19 since the pandemic began early last year. That was to test, trace, and isolate. As of August 16th, the province will no longer require people who have COVID symptoms or who test positive to isolate, though it's still being recommended. Our province will also stop routine testing, instead limiting tests to people with severe illness. The Taliban is relentless and is taking over a number of major centers in Afghanistan as U.S. troops continue to pull out. We'll have an update shortly from our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari. But first, here's a look at what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. The Lethbridge Folk Festival is taking place Saturday, August 14th at Legacy Regional Park's Belvedere Amphitheater from 1 to 7 p.m. Enjoy a day of free, family-friendly entertainment, live music, delicious food truck offerings, and more. The festival will feature folk, roots, and blues music performed by local bands Celtic Roots, the Steve Keenan Band, the Junkman's Choir, plus other musical artists Scott Cook, May Davis, and the Traveling Mabels will be performing. For details, visit lethbridgefolkclub.com. Fort Whoop-Up and New West Theatre partner up to provide a fun and exciting dinner theatre experience called Trader Tales, taking place Friday, August 20th from 6 to 9 p.m. Take in a private tour of the fort, enjoy a relaxing wagon ride, and delicious dinner. The evening culminates with an intimate performance featuring New West Theatre actors. Cost is $45 per person. For tickets, visit fort.galtmuseum.com. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
Well, the spring and summer months are typically the busiest time for those arranging to move their household belongings to a new home. Many of us hire a moving company to make things a little bit easier, but unfortunately, sometimes we run into unscrupulous operators that are ready to take advantage of consumers who are under stress. Joining us today to offer some advice on how to avoid these kinds of troubles is Ron Riemann, Marketplace Trust Representative with the Southern Alberta branch of the Better Business Bureau. Ron, welcome to the show. Good to have you on today.
Thanks for having me, Jeanette. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, Ron, is it extremely rare for people to run into mover fraud in Alberta, or does this happen more often than we think it does?
Unfortunately, May is a busy month for the Better Business Bureau, and a lot of times this can be avoided in terms of stress and turmoil for the impending move if the consumer does his or her own homework. And when I say that, research is the biggest thing that consumers can take away from their move. It could be a smooth ride, so to speak, or it could be a rough, bumpy ride.
Yeah, no kidding. So I'm curious as to how the fraud actually takes place. So I'm told that movers, sometimes a mover can actually hold your belongings hostage, so to speak. So how does this happen?
Well, let's backtrack a little bit and let's say, for example, you're ready for your move. You make a phone call, and because it's all about convenience, and unfortunately, pandemic has left us sometimes to go that route for the phone call. The phone call is done within 15 or 20 minutes, but there's really a lot of holes in that within that conversation with the price, with how much you're being charged, day and time, location, all that stuff that's usually handled within a contract itself. So you make the move, and then what happens the day of, the movers show up to your door, and the move is by the movers. They don't have the signs, or it's a blank information on the truck, and also there's also movers that are not licensed nor experienced. So they ask for a deposit up front, which I can get to that in a little bit later. So your move is now being taken care of by this company who's got your belongings, and now they're off to go to your destination. When you arrive at the destination, however, there seems to be a snag, because either they want more money, and they're not going to release the items that you've got in your vehicle. And unfortunately, they can do it two ways. We can either have to pay them, or you have to get them in storage where they're going to dump off the stuff. So I guess the whole summary to this explanation I'm trying to say is, call a reputable moving company and get three quotes. Get three quotes from them, because there are a lot of really, really good moving companies out there who will come into your home, and they will actually do a virtual meeting with you to talk and discuss. And they're very good. They're very good at what they do. And spend the extra few dollars to get the move done right.
Yeah, the idea of having your furniture held hostage is kind of terrifying a little bit.
Very terrifying. It is very terrifying. It certainly is.
Yeah. Now, another way that fraudulent moving companies try to take advantage, from what we've been told, is to try to avoid that written contract that you were just talking about. So what are the potential problems with this?
Well, first off, let's go back to the deposit itself. Reputable companies will not charge anything up front. If they do, it's a very, very, very small fee. If you get moving companies that charge 25%, I'm leery about that. Certainly anything more than 50%, you have zero control at that point. You have no control. And in fact, if you do want to make sure that you do have the information, a paper trail of the deposit, make sure it's through the credit card company, so that you can always go back and see if you can dispute that. But getting back to the reputable companies, they won't charge a deposit. They'll ask for the money at the end of the delivery. And a lot of times, everything is detailed out in the contract. The if it's a local move, it's based on an hourly thing. If it's a long-term move, you have to kind of like scope it out over a long period of time, and it's based on weight distribution. So there's a calculation that the moving companies do in regards to that. Make your move a lot simpler by having them talk about items that you're going to take yourself, as opposed to letting the moving company touch them. And we recommend that if there's some things that you feel you just don't feel comfortable with moving companies touch them, by all means take them with you. But for the most part, moving companies have a really, really good plan in place in making sure that the contract is rock solid.
Right, sounds good. Now, we were talking a little bit, maybe talk a little bit more about these fly-by-night movers, and you'd mentioned these people that just kind of show up with an unmarked rental truck rather than a clearly marked company-owned fleet truck. That should raise big red flags, right?
There's always a red flag when you deal with something like this. You're right. It's an unmarked van. They'll do all their work by a laptop between the two seats in their cargo van. There's always a sense of urgency. They want the deposit right away. And because moving deals with a limited window of time, and there is a sense of urgency on the consumer's part, it's attractive to the consumer to say, hey, this person is going to get me out of a jam, and this person is going to make sure that my move is going to be run smoothly. And that's not always the case, obviously. Again, the deposit's going to be very high. You've lost zero control at that point. And sometimes the move will not be perfect. You'll probably get a lot of bumps and bruises with your furniture. Again, it could be held hostage because they'll want more money because, well, we thought the weight amount was going to be this, when in fact it's actually this, so we need a little bit more money. And if there's no contract to state that, it's just one person's word against another, and then you're on the hook for an extra unfortunately, few $1,000s at that case. So
yeah, so just watch for those sketchy business practices, right?
it's always important to make sure that you get insurance. And talk to your policy insurance holder. Maybe they can help you and see what sort of coverage do I have. It's always good to know that reputable moving companies have their basic insurance as part of the move. We recommend that if you can afford it, get some extra insurance, and so it's kind of like rock solid. If something is busted or broken, or it's probably not, it failed to be part of the trip, or it's good to have the insurance. So certainly having insurance is really important. And again, insurance companies of your own will have that, but talk to the reputable companies. They'll have the insurance coverage for you as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice to get that moving insurance. So, of course, you mentioned there are many reputable moving companies across Lethbridge and across the province and, of course, the country as well. But then, then you get these bad guys that they'll attempt to represent themselves as one of these reputable companies. How does this even happen?
It's pretty darn easy, Jeanette, to actually start up a business, and you've got a cargo van, you've got 2-3 guys that are willing to move a lot of stuff, come up with a great website. You can claim to be a member of the Better Business Bureau or the Canadian Association of Movers. You can actually say whatever you want to say on your website. And that's where the stickiness comes into play, because at that point, we tell consumers, well, all websites are not, I shouldn't say all, some websites need a little bit more homework. And that's where we come into play, the Better Business Bureau, in association with the Canadian Association of Movers. They have a great directory, and we have a great plethora of information about businesses that are they local? Do they have insurance? Is there a physical location? Will I know for sure that when the van shows up the morning of, it's going to have the company information on the side of the vehicle? Are these professional movers? Are they trained to move big or small jobs? So you read all the stories, you see all the stories as well. And one of the big things, when a lot of consumers who are frauded by moving companies wish they could take back, was that they had done their homework earlier. They did a little bit more research. Research is the most important key through this whole thing.
Absolutely. Now, apparently some of these companies will actually use fake Google reviews. So is there a way to spot that?
We noticed that if you see a dozen to 2 dozen reviews, and they seem to have a bit of a trend that there's always 5 stars, and it seems to be worded the same way, it's a fake review. Most companies would like to think that they're always going to get 5 stars, and most reputable companies will always have that 5-star review. But if you get the odd 1 or 2 or 3-star review mixed in too, then you know that there's a little bit of credibility in the reviews itself. But notice the wording in the review itself: 5 stars all the time, and if it's the same explanation or it's the same amount of wordage in that review, then it's not always a true review in itself.
Now, you had mentioned that people can contact the Better Business Bureau, or of course the Canadian Association of Movers member directly to check out your mover first. So how do people do that? Where can they go for that?
Certainly, they can come to our website at bbb.org, and we can help you with information about any mover in the Southern Alberta and East Kootenays region, and we can help you with that. And we can tell you if they're licensed. We can tell you how long they've been in operation. We can tell you their letter grade. We can tell you if there's any complaints, and we can tell you if they're going to get the job done from the information that's on their business profile on our website. The Canadian Association of Movers has a wonderful directory where you can touch base with their website, and you'll know that these businesses are members of this actual mover site, Canadian Association of Movers, and they pay a fee. And so these are reputable, very good movers that are on this website here, and they can actually go to the Canadian Association of Movers website. I don't have their website information offhand, but if you just type it in the search bar, you'll be able to find it.
Awesome. Yeah. Now, if you do have a bad experience with a moving company, how can you actually go about filing a complaint?
With a complaint against the moving company itself, you have 60 days to file a claim against the moving company. If you feel you want to take it to the next level, so to speak, you can contact us at the Better Business Bureau, again, bbb.org. If you feel that you're justified to file a complaint and you feel you've got no resolution from the moving company itself, then we encourage you to go to our website. And again, if it's also with a reputable mover within the Canadian Association of Movers, or if you want to talk to them for that matter, go talk to them as well. They'll be able to help you too. And we want to help as much as we can to make your move really smooth.
Awesome. So any last piece of advice for those who live in Lethbridge? Well, especially because we're so windy here, right? So maybe strap down your stuff if you're moving in an open trailer, or so it doesn't blow away in our crazy winds.
You hit the nail right on the head,
Yeah.
Jeanette. That's exactly right, to make sure everything is strapped down and make sure that you know exactly what you've got on your contract, have everything detailed out. Wouldn't it be a bad idea to actually take some pictures of some of the stuff that is going in that impending move? And then you've got some video information as well. Have an itemized list, give a copy of that list to the mover, exactly, and they'll have a copy of it. Don't forget about the insurance, that's always important. And make sure it's, again, a reputable company. Pay the extra little bit of money to get the move done right. And there's certainly a lot of great companies out there. Do your homework, get 3 quotes, and you'll be surprised how stress-free your move will actually be.
Awesome. That is a great piece of advice. Thanks so much, Ron, for being with us today. Ron Riemann is the Marketplace Trust Representative with the Southern Alberta branch of the Better Business Bureau.
Thanks, Jeanette. I've enjoyed it. Thank you again.
I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.
A recent report by the BBC says the Taliban has captured 3 regional capitals in Afghanistan. To talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, we mentioned this before. As U.S. troops pull out of Afghanistan, the Taliban is gaining even more of a stronghold.
Yeah, this is no surprise, right, Hal? So even before the announcement was made that the U.S. will remove troops and withdraw from Afghanistan, we knew that the Taliban, their presence there was causing suicide bombings and so many terror sprees daily, all over the country. So I think the decision wasn't made on the fact that, okay, we finally have stability and peace in Afghanistan, but to what end or how do we stay there because we can't solve this problem. And the U.S. has tried to sit down for a ceasefire with the Taliban. It hasn't worked. So in the meantime, the U.S. troops are withdrawing, and the Taliban are, relentless. They're not even, allowing like to skip a beat and to allow, them to fully withdraw and then to go about their business. They are just pounding and really taking over major areas. So they've made major gains in the north. That's where they're starting, and they're trying to make their way through the country, and that's exactly what they will do.
Now, there's a report that an Afghan Air Force pilot was killed by a bomb blast in the Kabul district, an attack claimed by the Taliban. Now, Lisa, the sticky bomb attached to his vehicle went off, and officials say the blast also injured 5 civilians.
Yeah, this is sad. This is a young pilot who was trained on U.S. jets, and quite talented, and had been working for about 4 or 5 years. So he was new on the job, relatively speaking, and this was a bomb that was targeted to kill him. This is a very symbolic attack because, as we talked about, the Taliban is going on this rampage, and they're taking out civilians, and they're taking over cities, and they're taking over provinces at a time, and making major announcements as they go along, trying to flex their muscles. But when they can make the announcement that they killed a pilot, I mean, in any culture, particularly in the Middle East, somebody who's been trained to fly US jets is very well respected in the military. So this is a very symbolic attack. It's one individual, although 5 others were injured with the bomb that went off. It's a very symbolic statement, and the Taliban came out right away to, of course, take responsibility for the attack.
A former senior UK military commander is warning that Afghanistan may once again become a base for international terrorism. General Sir Richard Barron's described the withdrawal of troops as a big mistake, and we may see more terrorist attacks in places like Europe and possibly here in North America.
Yeah, perhaps. And my first reaction to his statement is like, of course, duh, right? We know that they're there. We know that they obviously are interested in expansion. Any terror group that we've seen in the Middle East has only expanded in size and in territory when Western influence or presence is less. So we call that, the political vacuum that exists. So they take advantage of it and they grow exponentially. We saw this with ISIS, we see it with Hamas, we see it with Al Qaeda, we see it with the Muslim Brotherhood, and of course we see it with the Taliban. So this is no surprise. His comment doesn't come as a surprise. But the surrounding countries, many of them are in turmoil, and the ones that aren't are in defense mode, like Israel, for example. So I think that we're dealing with a region that has always looked at Afghanistan as a terror headquarter, and now it's only going to get worse. It's not news, but it's going to get worse.
Any chance that the Biden administration officials may reconsider pulling out troops, especially now that the Taliban is gaining such a stronghold, Lisa?
Yeah, that decision would have to be made if the initial decision was made on the fact that everything is peachy, so we're going to leave. They knew that this is what was going to happen. So I don't think that their decision or there are any new facts being presented for them to step back from the initial decision to withdraw troops. So both arguments make plenty of sense. You also have to look at the other side of the argument to say that so many men and women, young Americans have been lost in that war and have been killed in a war that has had no end. Meaning, what is our bottom line for Afghanistan? What can we accomplish by being there that would justify the risk of having men in uniform, women in uniform on the ground there?
According to Hamas, 69 of its Palestinian and Jordanian members were sentenced by a Saudi court recently to prison terms ranging from 3 to 21 years, Lisa. This is in connection with men arrested 3 years ago accused of being affiliated with a terrorist organization.
Yes. So Saudi Arabia is ironically very, very, very harsh and hard on in the terror groups that it doesn't agree with. And of course, Hamas, being the splinter group of the Muslim Brotherhood, is on the terror list for the Saudis and therefore a no-no. And these individuals were allegedly rounded up and arrested 3 years ago because they were fundraising for and recruiting for Hamas, which is not allowed. So the Saudis, they'll partake in terror activities as long as it's not on their own soil. So you see them involved in a proxy war, for example, in Yemen. But when it comes to their own borders, they want to keep terrorism out, particularly when it's a group that they're not funding. Hamas, of course, is funded by the Iranian regime. And that is the major fight. And the fight for balance and power in the Middle East is between the two powers, Saudi Arabia, the Sunni power, and the Iranian regime, the Shiite power, going at it with their different proxy wars in different places, but they will fight each other's terror organization. So, of course, Iran supporting Hamas is not going to be tolerated by the Saudis.
Israeli aircraft bombed Hamas sites in the Gaza Strip over the weekend. It was in response to balloons that were launched from a Palestinian enclave. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, this is more of the same. We saw the flare up between Hamas in Gaza and, of course, the Israeli IDF at the end of May for quite a long time. We had a ceasefire, but you see the results of the ceasefire, and nobody talks about this. We're not seeing any widespread media coverage about this, but we will if Israel should retaliate on a larger scale and begin, wide range retaliation across Gaza. These are extremely pinpointed targets that they're hitting in retaliation or in response for the relentless fire balloons that are being sent into Israel. When you look at what their goal is, obviously they're doing damage. Obviously, they are burning acres and acres of land in Israel. But their goal is to say, we're here and we're going to continue this. They're not just doing this in Israel, they're doing it on the streets of Canada and Europe and the United States as well. Just last week in New York, they had an intifada parade to say, we're not even going to stop at just getting Israel. We want all Jews gone. When you look at the root of the problem, it's quite serious. And I think the media should be taking a much more serious look at this. It's not just a color war, or taking the side of the underdog, which they believe is the Palestinians. This is provoked by much more a real theory of genocide, and not on the part of the Israelis. Don't be fooled by the mainstream media. It's on the part of this anti-Israel, anti-Semitic force that wants not just Israel gone, but all Jews gone.
New Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, Lisa, is blaming the government of Lebanon for the recent rocket attacks fired from within its borders, even if Hezbollah was the group that ultimately fired the rockets.
Right. So, this has always been an issue for Israel because it has had a relatively decent relationship with the government of Lebanon for many years. But they also know that Lebanon is going through a huge crisis right now. They're reinventing themselves as protesters on the streets because they have a terror problem, because they have a governmental problem, because they have this chaos. And the point of Israel blaming the government is to say, look, you need to curb this influence of Hezbollah within your borders. We understand that it's a cancerous, presence that they have there, but you need to help curb them, and they shouldn't be using Lebanon territory or to be launching these weapons into Israel. They shouldn't be there, and to have the confidence that they have such access or proximity to Israel. And for that reason, Naftali Bennett is saying, we look to you, Lebanon, and we're watching you, and you better do more to curb Hezbollah's influence there.
The large surge of illegal migration by Cubans to the U.S. continues along the Florida shores. Lisa, it's fueled by an economic crisis exacerbated by the pandemic, increased U.S. sanctions, and cutbacks in aid from its Venezuelan ally, which is also suffering.
Yes, it's total chaos in Cuba, as we saw so many people take to the streets. And we had one official from the State Department tweet to say that it's because of COVID that they're doing this. And so many Cubans, American Cubans, particularly in Florida, who are either recent migrants or have fled to the United States because of their parents' stories, were very upset by this comment. They want the world to know that the people in Cuba who are fleeing, who want to flee, who are protesting, who are expressing their disenchantment, it's not because of COVID or the economy solely. Obviously, that's going to be the proverbial straw that breaks the camel's back. But it is the government. It's a socialist government that doesn't work, that doesn't provide for its people, that doesn't make sure that COVID is handled properly, that the economy is handled properly, because the government is not run in to benefit the people, to let them, prosper and grow and live with freedom and with opportunity. And these are all, of course, capitalist ideas that they are against. So the people in Cuba are really at wit's end, and many of them are taking to the seas to come by boat to Florida, to the shores of the United States. And as we know, the Biden administration told them very, very point blank, do not come here. This is not a migrant group that they're interested in taking, even though our southern border is currently open to millions, and the numbers that the U.S. cannot absorb. But it's really a very, very hypocritical place that we're at in terms of U.S. Immigration policy. But really, our hearts go out to these people who have come to the place where they're willing to risk their lives, their children's lives, to get into a boat in tumultuous waters to get themselves to freedom, to safety, to a better life.
Yeah, very sad to see, especially when many of those boats collapse and you see so many of the refugees in the water. Now, Lisa, the United Nations, along with various human rights groups, are pushing the government of Zimbabwe to prosecute a guy who married a 14-year-old girl. Tell me more about that.
Yes, I mean, it's wonderful that this story is getting some coverage, that the UN is speaking out about it. But to me, it was like, oh, well, why did they pinpoint this guy in Zimbabwe when this is happening all over the world in different places in the Middle East, in Africa, where it's cultural. It's absolutely cultural and absolutely accepted. Not only to marry a 14-year-old, but to have multiple wives who are underage or of age or whatever may be, or to mutilate them so that they don't, experience any enjoyment or pleasure from sex. It's absolutely, astonishing what the cultures in these places are. And then you see the woke crowd talk about, how women have it so badly in the West. So it's an eye opener, and I'm glad that the UN is making an example out of this guy. And I hope that more human rights groups focus and flash a spotlight on these very important topics, and to really popularize this to stop this trend, to really save these young women from this horrific plight.
Espionage between Taiwan and China has grown a little more sophisticated because of fewer people-to-people exchanges and more use of cyber tools. The relations between the two countries remains quite tenuous.
Yes, there's a few different parts of this story, because first, yes, you look at the tenuous relationship between these two countries, and how it's becoming extremely heightened, and the Biden administration is getting involved, obviously taking sides and supporting any enemy of China at this point, at least verbally. But I think the more important point here is the sophistication of the cyber tools that China is working on. And I think that is lost on a lot of people, because, in the United States, in Canada, whenever we experience a cyber attack, it's more that we're on the defense. We're saying, wow, how did that happen? How can we harden these soft targets? But we don't harden the soft targets before it happens. And not only that, we're not, obviously, we don't have any reason to go after these other countries with cyber attacks. So we're not working on our cyber capabilities. And for that reason, we see that China will and will continue to surpass us. Other rogue nations as well, like Russia, like North Korea, like Iran, they also are spending their military funds on cyber capabilities, because they understand that is, the warfare of the present and the future. And that's something to really focus on, and to really, to say, where are we, and can we combat this threat? If that's the new, battlefield, then we need to come prepared, and we need to at least be able to combat or to speak up to what they're doing.
Lisa, wildfires continue in many regions across North America, including where you are in California and in Canada and BC, one province over from us. Thousands have also fled a Greek island as wildfires continue to rage on there, threatening thousands of people.
Yes, this is horrific. I mean, when you look at these natural disasters and how difficult it is to get people out of harm's way, to contain these fires in the summer heat, and to prevent them from continuing on, it's truly tremendous. I know here in Southern California, there's an issue with homeless people setting fires because they're using barbecues to either make food or for meth, unfortunately, and obviously being careless and setting fires and really damaging acres and acres of land, putting people in harm's way. The firefighters are in harm's way trying to battle these fires. And of course, we have the summer heat and the dry heat here that really makes things much harder to really contain these fires. And in Greece, I mean, they've had so much in terms of a tough time in the past 4 or 5 years, and now add to it this natural disaster that will make it very difficult for them to evacuate, to get people from island to island. It's the logistics of moving people from island to island and to contain these fires.
Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, thank you and stay safe.
My pleasure.